My name is Alex, I'm 32 years old, and for a living, I build things with my hands. I'm a custom contractor, which is a polite way of saying I spend my days covered in sawdust and paint, but I wouldn't have it any other way. For years, I believed that if I just kept my head down, worked hard, and didn't cause any trouble, I'd eventually earn the respect of the people who were supposed to love me most. I was wrong. The moment of clarity didn't come as a slow realization, it came as a sharp, stinging slap across my face at a family dinner, delivered by my own mother-in-law. The sound of it cracked through the polite chatter, and in the ringing silence that followed, I knew something had broken forever. But what she didn't know, what none of them knew, was that the quiet, unassuming man she had just assaulted was not the man they thought he was. They had no idea of the life I had built in the shadows of their disregard, and they were about to find out in the most dramatic way possible. Before I continue with this story, which I promise you is 100% true, do me a favor. If you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or disrespected by the very people who should have been your biggest cheerleaders, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments that I'm not alone, because for the longest time, I truly felt like I was. My story doesn't start with my wife's family, it starts with my own. Growing up, I was the reliable one, the quiet one, the one who never needed anything. My brother, Leo, was the opposite. He was the sun around which our family revolved. He was charismatic, athletic, and had a smile that could talk our parents into anything. He got the new cleats for soccer, the expensive tutor for his math grades, the down payment for his first car. I got the hand-me-downs, the expectation to figure things out on my own, and a pat on the back for being so low maintenance. It wasn't that my parents were cruel, they were just selectively blind. In their eyes, Leo was the investment, the one with potential. I was the safe bet, the one who would just be okay no matter what. So, I learned to be okay. When I wanted a new bike at 12, I spent the summer mowing lawns in our neighborhood until I had enough cash to buy a used one myself. When I needed a car to get to my first job at 16, I bought a beat-up 1998 sedan from a neighbor with money I'd saved from working at a hardware store. I learned to fix it myself from watching YouTube videos and reading old manuals. Leo crashed his new car within 6 months, and my parents sighed, dipped into their savings, and got him another one. I was never jealous of Leo's things, I was jealous of the attention, the inherent belief they had in him. The message I received was clear: Leo's failures were worthy of rescue, while my successes were simply expected and, therefore, invisible. This pattern continued into young adulthood. They paid for Leo's 4-year university degree, which he barely scraped through and then did nothing with. When I said I wanted to go into the trades, specifically carpentry, my father looked at me with a deep, profound disappointment. A carpenter, Alex? All that potential, and you want to be a laborer? They offered no help for trade school, so I paid my own way, working full-time during the day for a local contractor and taking classes at night. I was perpetually exhausted, my hands raw and calloused, but I was learning. I was building something. It was during those grueling years that I met Mr. Henderson, the owner of the company I worked for. He was a gruff, 60-something man with a face like a roadmap and hands like catcher's mitts. He saw something in me my own father never did. He didn't see a laborer, he saw a craftsman. He saw the way I studied the wood, the precision of my cuts, the pride I took in a perfectly joined corner. He took me under his wing, not just teaching me the skills of the trade, but the secrets of the business. Anyone can swing a hammer, kid, he'd tell me, his voice raspy from years of sawdust. But not everyone can read a blueprint, bid a job, manage a crew, and balance a book. You can. You have the mind for it. He was the first person who ever made me feel like my quiet diligence was a strength, not a sign that I was unremarkable. When I was 25, he sat me down in his cluttered office. I'm retiring in a few years, Alex, he said. I could sell this business to some big outfit, or I could help you start your own. You've earned it over the next 2 years, he mentored me intensely. I got my general contractor's license. He introduced me to his exclusive clients, his architects, his suppliers. When I officially launched my own company, Henderson Contracting, a tribute to him, he co-signed my first business loan. My family barely noticed. To them, I had just gone from being an employee to being self-employed, which in their minds was just a riskier version of the same blue-collar life. They had no concept of the scale. I started small, with kitchen and bath remodels. But thanks to Mr. Henderson's connections and my growing reputation for quality, the jobs got bigger. I started doing full custom homes for wealthy clients, the kind of people who didn't blink at a 7-figure budget. I lived frugally, pouring every penny back into the business, better tools, better equipment, hiring a small, dedicated crew. I was making more money than I'd ever imagined, but my lifestyle didn't change. I still drove a reliable but modest truck. I still lived in a small, rented apartment. My parents and Leo assumed I was just getting by. It was during this time that I met Sarah. She was a landscape architect consulting on one of my projects. She was brilliant, kind, and saw me for who I was, not who my family thought I was. When she finally met my parents and Leo, she saw the dynamic instantly. "It's like you're a ghost to them," she said one night, her voice laced with a fury on my behalf that I had never allowed myself to feel. She was my missing piece, the person who validated my feelings and celebrated my quiet, hidden successes with a genuine joy that was completely foreign to me. We got married in a small ceremony, paid for entirely by us. My parents were there, smiling for the cameras, but I could feel their subtle judgment. It was nothing like the lavish party they'd undoubtedly throw if Leo ever settled down. Sarah's family was a different story, or so I thought at first. Her mother, Carol, and her father, David, were impeccably dressed, living in a large suburban house, and very proud of their status. They had their own golden child, Sarah's brother, Mark. Mark was in his late 20s, had drifted between 3 different majors in college before dropping out, and now worked a series of low-level sales jobs he quickly lost. Yet, Carol and David spoke of him as a late bloomer on the verge of greatness. They were polite to me, but in a strained, distant way. I was the contractor who had somehow landed their brilliant daughter. At family gatherings, David would ask me condescending questions like, "So, keeping busy with the hammering and all that?" Carol would offer me unsolicited advice on dressing better. They made it clear they saw my profession as beneath them. The escalation began subtly. They'd make offhanded comments about their finances, about the rising cost of living, about how much money they were pouring into Mark's latest business idea, a subscription box for artisanal dog toys. Then came the requests, disguised as jokes. "Hey Alex, the back deck is looking a little rickety. You could probably fix that in a weekend, right?" Or, "Mark needs a new office space. You must know some cheap places, right?" I always politely deflected, and Sarah would steer the conversation away, her jaw tight. The night of the slap was supposed to be a dinner celebrating Carol and David's 35th wedding anniversary, held at their home. The air was thick with tension from the moment we arrived. Mark had just been fired from another job, and the mood was sour. I was trying to be helpful, carrying a stack of plates from the dining room to the kitchen. Carol was coming through the doorway from the other direction, talking animatedly on her phone, not looking where she was going. I tried to step back, but it was too late. I bumped into her, not hard, but enough to make her stumble and drop her phone. Before I could even utter an apology, her hand whipped out and cracked across my cheek. The slap echoed in the sudden, dead silence of the room. My face burned, but it was the shock that took my breath away. Everyone froze. Sarah, David, Mark, Sarah's Aunt Patty, they all just stared. Carol stood there, her chest heaving, her face a mask of fury. "Look what you did," she shrieked, pointing at her phone on the floor, the screen now a spiderweb of cracks. Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "It was an accident," just pure, unadulterated rage directed at me. The silence that followed the slap was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. My cheek throbbed, a dull, hot pulse that seemed to count every second of the frozen tableau. Sarah was the first to move. She rushed to my side, her face pale with shock and fury. "Mom! What is wrong with you?" she gasped, her voice trembling. Carol, however, seemed to double down, her own shock morphing into self-righteous indignation. He wasn't watching where he was going. He broke my phone. He could have knocked me over. David, her husband, finally found his voice, not to admonish his wife, but to manage the situation in the worst way possible. All right, let's all calm down. It was an accident. Alex, you should have been more careful. Just apologize to Carol and let's move on to apologize? The word hung in the air, so absurd, so utterly disconnected from reality that I almost laughed. I looked from David's placating face to Carol's furious one, and I felt something shift inside me. It was the final click of a lock that had been turning for 30 years. It was the realization that to people like this, I would always be the one at fault. My intentions, my character, my very being were irrelevant. I was simply an object that had gotten in the way. Sarah was having none of it. Apologize? He should apologize? Mom, you assaulted him. You hit my husband. Mark, the golden boy, snorted from his position leaning against the counter. Oh, come on, Sarah. It was just a slap. Don't be so dramatic. Dad's right, Alex should just say sorry so we can eat. The casual dismissal, the complete lack of empathy, was breathtaking. They weren't a family, they were a pack, and they had just closed ranks to protect their own, casting me out without a second thought. It was in that moment, with my cheek still stinging and my wife's hand gripping my arm, that the confrontation I never wanted finally became the one I desperately needed. The dinner, of course, was ruined. We sat down at the table, but the food was tasteless. The air was thick with unspoken resentment. Carol shot daggers at me from across the table. David tried to make awkward small talk about the weather. Mark scrolled through his phone, completely disengaged. Sarah was a silent, simmering statue of rage beside me. Then David, in a foolish attempt to restore normalcy, turned the conversation to business. So, Mark was telling us about this new venture, he began, his tone artificially bright. It's a revolutionary app for rating public restrooms. We think it's got real potential. We're thinking of remortgaging the house to give him the seed money he needs. Carol nodded eagerly. It's a brilliant idea. Not everyone is cut out for physical labor, she said, looking directly at me. Some people use their brains. That was it. That was the final straw. All the years of being overlooked by my own family, all the condescension from hers, the slap, the demand for an apology, it all coalesced into a single point of cold, hard clarity. Sarah looked at me, her eyes giving me all the permission I needed. I placed my fork down gently on my plate. Remortgaging the house is a big risk, David, I said, my voice quiet but carrying across the tense table. Especially in this market, David scoffed. You have to spend money to make money, Alex. Something you wouldn't understand. I took a slow sip of water. Oh, I understand, I said. For instance, I understand that the Henderson development project over on Beacon Hill, the one with the 12 luxury townhomes? The one the local business journal wrote a piece on last month. David and Carol exchanged a look. That development was the talk of their wealthy suburb. Of course, we know it, Carol said impatiently. What about it? I looked her directly in the eye. I own it. My company is the developer and the general contractor. That project is valued at 8 figures. And yesterday, I sold the last unit. I let that hang in the air. The clinking of Mark's spoon against his dessert bowl stopped. David's mouth hung slightly open. Carol's perfectly made-up face seemed to crumble, the mask of superiority dissolving into pure, unadulterated shock. And my phone, I continued, my voice still calm, the one you were so concerned about me damaging? It's a 3-year-old model I never bothered to upgrade. Your new iPhone, Carol, the one I shattered? Consider it a gift. I'll have a new one delivered to your door tomorrow morning. In fact, I'll buy one for everyone at this table. It's the least I can do, considering the entertainment. The revelation didn't land like a bombshell, it landed like a neutron bomb. It vaporized their entire reality, their carefully constructed hierarchy, leaving only the raw, ugly structure of their greed standing. The stunned silence was a different kind this time. It wasn't the shocked silence of a social faux pas, it was the profound, system-crashing silence of a worldview being forcibly rebooted. David's face had gone from smug to slack-jawed. Mark was staring at me as if he'd never seen me before, his own petty failures suddenly cast in a harsh, unflattering light. But the most telling reaction was Carol's. The anger in her eyes was gone, replaced by a frantic, calculating gleam. The gears were turning, recalibrating my worth, re-evaluating my position in her world. I wasn't the blue-collar laborer anymore. I was a resource. You own that development. David stammered, the words catching in his throat. I simply nodded. It was Carol who recovered first, her voice taking on a syrupy, artificial sweetness that was far more nauseating than her anger had been. Alex, my goodness. Why didn't you tell us? We had no idea. Oh, this is wonderful news. We're so proud of you. Proud of me. The words, which I had craved from my own parents for my entire life, now sounded utterly hollow, a transparently transactional lie. Sarah, sensing the shift, squeezed my hand under the table. Her expression was one of pure, vindicated disgust. You weren't proud of him 5 minutes ago when you slapped him, Mom, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Carol waved a dismissive hand, as if swatting away a fly. Oh, that was just a misunderstanding. A silly little flare-up. Alex knows I didn't mean it. We were all just a little stressed suddenly, the slap was a silly little flare-up, my assault was a misunderstanding, but the speed of the pivot was breathtaking. Then came the inevitable. Well, David said, clearing his throat and sitting up straighter, a predatory light in his eyes. Since you're doing so well, Alex. Mark's app idea. He just needs a little capital to get it off the ground. 50,000 would probably do it. For you, that's just a drop in the bucket, right? A small investment in family. This was the moment. The culmination of everything. They felt no shame, no remorse for their behavior. They saw my success not as something I had earned, but as a new community pot from which they could all draw. I looked at Mark, who was now nodding eagerly, his earlier contempt forgotten. I looked at Carol and David, their faces alight with greedy anticipation. I felt Sarah's hand, a warm, solid anchor in the storm of their entitlement. I stood up from the table, and Sarah stood with me. No, I said. The word was simple, quiet, and absolute. David blinked. No? What do you mean, no? I mean no, I repeated, my voice gaining strength. I will not be investing in Mark's app. I will not be fixing your deck for free. I will not be a solution to the financial problems you've created for yourselves by coddling a 30-year-old man who refuses to grow up. My money, the money I earned through years of work you looked down on, is not available to you. I turned my gaze to Carol. And you will never, ever lay a hand on me again. Respect isn't something you can buy back with fake praise once you find out someone has a bigger bank account than you expected. You don't get to treat me like dirt 1 minute and a benefactor the next. I pulled out my wallet, took out $500 in cash, and placed it on the table. This is for the dinner. And for the phone. We're leaving. We walked out of that house, leaving them sitting at the table in stunned, furious disbelief. The door closing behind us was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a cage opening. It was the sound of my own self-worth finally, definitively, slamming the door on their toxicity. The drive home was quiet. Sarah just held my hand, her thumb tracing small circles on my knuckles. It was a silence of solidarity, of a shared battle won. When we got inside our apartment, she finally spoke. I am so proud of you, she said, her eyes shining. I have never been more proud of anyone in my entire life, and for the first time, the words landed. They felt real, earned, and utterly pure. But we both knew the fight wasn't over. The standoff at the dinner table was just the opening salvo. The real war, the campaign of manipulation, began the very next morning. It started with Carol. She called Sarah's phone relentlessly. When Sarah didn't answer, she left a string of voicemails, each one a masterclass in emotional manipulation. The first was tearful, full of "I don't know what I did to deserve this and how could you let him speak to your father and me that way." The next was angry, accusing Sarah of choosing a man over her own family. The one after that was pitiful, talking about how her heart was broken and she couldn't eat or sleep. It was a textbook performance, and it might have worked on a younger, less aware Sarah. But my wife was a rock. She listened to the first one, her expression hardening, then deleted the rest without listening. "She's not sorry for what she did," Sarah said, her voice firm. "She's sorry she got caught. She's sorry her cash machine just walked out the door." Next came the flying monkeys. Sarah's Aunt Patty, who had been at the dinner, called. She was more sympathetic. "Carol is a wreck, Sarah," she said. "You know how she is. She has a temper, but she loves you. And your father is so stressed about money. Alex revealing his success like that, it was a bit cruel, don't you think?" Sarah handled it beautifully. "Aunt Patty, was it cruel when Mom slapped my husband for an accident? Was it cruel when they demanded he apologize? Was it cruel when they immediately tried to hit him up for $50,000? His success isn't the issue. Their character is." Then my own family got involved, which was a new and unwelcome twist. Carol, in a stroke of insidious genius, had called my mother. I got a call from my mom, her voice dripping with disappointed concern. "Alex, I heard there was some trouble with Sarah's parents." Her mother called me, very upset. "She said you were terribly rude to them." "Son, that's not how we raised you. You need to be the bigger person and apologize to keep the peace." The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. My mother, who had never once stood up for me against the casual neglect of my own family, was now counseling me to prostrate myself before my abusive in-laws for the sake of a peace that only ever benefited them. "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously level, "did Carol tell you that she physically assaulted me?" There was a pause. "Well, she said there was a little incident, but that you blew it all out of proportion." I laughed, a short, bitter sound. "Of course she did. I'm done, Mom. I'm done being the bigger person. I'm done keeping a peace that requires me to be a doormat." I ended the call, my hand shaking with an anger that was decades old. Through it all, my chosen family rallied. I called Mr. Henderson and told him everything. He just chuckled his gravelly chuckle. "Good for you, kid," he said. "Took you long enough. Some people only understand the word no. Stick to your guns." My best friend Jake came over with beer and pizza and just let me vent for hours, validating every ounce of my frustration. But my biggest support was Sarah. We were a team. We blocked Carol's number. We set boundaries with the relatives who called. We talked everything through, late into the night, reinforcing our decision and our shared future. We were an island, and for the first time in my life, that felt like the safest place in the world. In the months that followed our dramatic exit, a quiet but profound shift occurred. By refusing to engage with the toxicity, we starved it of the oxygen it needed to survive. The manipulative phone calls eventually trickled to a stop. The flying monkeys retreated. We were left in a bubble of our own making, and it was peaceful. It was in this newfound peace that we truly began to build our life, not in secret, but out in the open. We started looking for a house. Not a mansion to show off, but a home. We found a beautiful piece of land a little ways out of the city, with old trees and a view of a small lake. It was the kind of place I used to dream about as a kid. And I decided to build our house myself. Or rather, to have my company build it. It became my passion project, a testament to everything I had worked for. Sarah designed the gardens, creating a landscape that felt like a sanctuary. This project became our focus, our healing. It was tangible proof of the life we were creating, a life built on our own terms, with a foundation of mutual respect. Meanwhile, the consequences of our absence began to ripple through Sarah's family. Without us as a distraction or a potential financial safety net, the cracks in their foundation began to show. As we had suspected, David and Carol went ahead and remortgaged their home to fund Mark's ridiculous restroom rating app. The app launched 6 months later to absolute crickets. It was a spectacular failure, burning through their money with nothing to show for it. The strain was immense. Aunt Patty, who remained a neutral source of information, told Sarah that the fighting in their house was constant. David blamed Mark. Mark blamed the market. Carol blamed David for not giving Mark enough money. They were imploding, consumed by the entitlement and poor judgment they had cultivated for decades. Their financial situation became dire. David's pride prevented him from admitting the extent of their problems, and they started falling behind on their new, larger mortgage payments. The foreclosure notices started arriving. The life they had built, propped up by an image of success rather than actual substance, was crumbling around them. I felt a strange mix of emotions hearing this. There was no joy, no sense of I told you so. There was a quiet, somber vindication, but mostly, there was a profound sadness for Sarah, who was watching her family self-destruct. But there was also a deep, personal healing happening within me. For my entire life, I had tied my self-worth to the approval of others, first my parents, then my in-laws. I had worked hard, in part, to one day prove to them that I was worthy. The slap, the confrontation, and their subsequent downfall taught me the most valuable lesson of my life: their validation was never the prize. The prize was the life I had built. It was the respect of my mentor, the love and partnership of my wife, the pride in my own work, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I had done it all myself. I didn't need their approval. I just needed my own. About a year after the infamous dinner, when the framing on our new house was nearly complete, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Alex. The voice was hesitant, unfamiliar. It's Mark. I was so taken aback I couldn't speak for a moment. In my mind, Mark was still the smug, entitled freeloader from that night. What do you want, Mark? I asked, my tone guarded. I just wanted to talk, he stammered. I know it's been a while. Things have been hard. He proceeded to tell me the whole story, the story we already knew in pieces from Aunt Patty. The failed app. The remortgage. The impending foreclosure. But what was different was the tone. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, humbled exhaustion. He told me he'd gotten a job. A real job, working in the warehouse of a logistics company. He was starting at the bottom, making minimum wage, but he was working. It's hard, he said, and I could hear the crack in his voice. I never knew what it was like to be this tired. To actually have to show up every day or you don't get paid. Then came the part one never expected. I wanted to apologize, he said, the words coming out in a rush. For that night. For everything. The way we treated you. The way I acted. I was an arrogant jerk. I looked down on you because it was easier than looking at myself. You built everything you have, and I was just handed things. I never understood the difference until now. I am so sorry. It wasn't a perfect apology. It was clumsy and born of desperation. But it was genuine. I could hear it. He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for a job. He was just apologizing. I told him I appreciated the call and that I needed to think about it. I immediately called Sarah and told her everything. She was as stunned as I was. We talked for a long time that night, sitting on the unfinished porch of our future home, watching the stars come out. People can change, she said softly. Sometimes they just need to hit rock bottom to do it. A week later, Mark called again. This time, he asked if I would be willing to meet him for coffee. Just him. I agreed. We met at a nondescript diner halfway between our two worlds. He looked different. Thinner, tired, but his eyes were clearer. He told me his parents were still a mess, locked in a cycle of blame and denial. He was trying to save what he could to help them, but he knew the house was a lost cause. He asked me questions about my business, not as a potential investor, but with a genuine curiosity. He wanted to know how I started, how hard it was. For the first time, he saw me. At the end of our coffee, I made a decision. I won't give you money, Mark, I said, looking him straight in the eye. "But if you're serious about working, I might have a spot for you on one of my crews." Labor. Hauling drywall, site cleanup. It's the hardest, most thankless work there is. You'd start at the very bottom. No special treatment. His eyes widened, and for a second, I thought he'd refuse. Then, he nodded slowly. "I'll take it," he said. It wasn't a reconciliation with the whole family. It was a single, fragile bridge built on the rubble of their old life. It was a chance, and I was cautiously, tentatively willing to give it. Looking back on it all now, standing in the finished kitchen of the home I built with my own 2 hands, with Sarah by my side, the journey feels both impossibly long and incredibly swift. Mark started working for me the following Monday. The first few months were brutal for him. He was clumsy, slow, and not used to physical labor. My crew was skeptical. But he showed up. Every single day. He never complained. He did the grunt work with a quiet determination I had never seen in him. Slowly, he earned a sliver of respect. He's still with my company, and he's actually learning the trade. He's found a sense of purpose he never had. Our relationship is strange, but it's real. It's based on work and a shared, unspoken understanding of how far he's fallen and how hard he's trying to climb. His parents, Carol and David, did lose their house. They now live in a small, rented apartment, the one Aunt Patty helped them find. Their pride is shattered, their lifestyle gone. We see them on major holidays, at Aunt Patty's house, a neutral ground. The interactions are strained and awkward. Carol tries to be pleasant, but the resentment still flickers in her eyes. David is mostly silent, a ghost of his former, bombastic self. There has been no grand apology from them, and I no longer expect one. The boundary is clear and absolute: our lives, and my finances, are off limits. They are polite because they have no other choice. My relationship with my own family remains distant. My mother still thinks I should have been kinder, my father still doesn't understand my success, and Leo is still Leo, drifting through life on their dime. But it doesn't hurt me anymore. I have come to accept that I cannot change them. I can only change how I allow them to affect me. The greatest lesson in all of this is that you can't build your house on someone else's land. You can't build your self-worth on someone else's approval. For years, I sought validation from people who were incapable of giving it because their own foundations were rotten. The slap was not an attack, it was a gift. It was a demolition ball that shattered the facade and forced me to see the truth. True family isn't about blood or obligation. It's the person who holds your hand in the car after you've been humiliated. It's the mentor who sees your potential when no one else does. It's the friend who brings pizza and lets you rage. It's the brother-in-law who hits rock bottom and decides to build himself back up, one piece of drywall at a time. It's the family you choose, the family you build. My vindication didn't come from proving them wrong or watching them fail. It came from proving myself right. It came from building a life so full of love, respect, and quiet pride that their opinion simply became irrelevant noise in the distance. And that is a peace no amount of money can buy. If my story has resonated with you, if you've ever had to build your own damn house after someone else tried to tear you down, share this with someone who needs to hear that it gets better. Let me know in the comments what the turning point was for you in setting your own boundaries. Thank you for listening.